world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Wednesday, October 29th, as you're listening to this. We're in the 29th day of this government shutdown. Now, doesn't appear that there's any end in sight yet. Now, there may be some cracks forming, specifically within MAGA, specifically within the Republican Party. And I think ultimately the Republicans are going to be the ones to cave on this. We've talked about it, but I'm going to talk about it again. Now, they tried for the 13th time to end up passing the House-led CR that the House passed back in September, the last time the House was in session. And they tried for the 13th time, and lo and behold, it failed. Why? Well, because Democrats want two things, typically. Now, they may end up trying for more once negotiations actually start up in earnest, and they may be able to get more out of it. But the two main things they want is a continuation of the Affordable Care Act subsidies that expire at the end of the year, and they want to restore, all of the $1 trillion that was cut to Medicaid over the next 10 years. Now, they may not get all of that $1 trillion. Maybe they only delay the cuts by a few years and put off starting it till 2029 or something like that. They could deal with that because they could extend it later. And Republicans may sign off on it because, well, that would be something that would go into effect under the next president, presuming that's going to be a Democrat, and they could sabotage the next Democrat. Okay. So when we're dealing with it, you got to look at, that would be typical of what would happen in the past. Republicans would negotiate, but they're not negotiating right now. If they were serious about governing and serious about actually getting something accomplished and doing something for the American people, Democrats have said unlimited extensions of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Republicans would come in and say, okay, well, we can't do unlimited. How about 2 years? Democrats would say 10. Republicans would say 4. Democrats would say 8, and they might meet in the middle at 5 or 6. Something like that. That's how it used to go. That's not how it's going right now. They want unlimited subsidies is what the Democrats want. Republicans say, go fuck yourself. That's what they basically said. They're not negotiating. They wanted to restore the $1 trillion cut to Medicaid over 10 years. Again, in the past, Republicans would come out and say, okay, well, let's delay starting it by 2 years and we'll still cut, 800 or what was it? It was $1 trillion, so 800 billion. Democrats would say, no, we're stored, they could go back and forth and they might meet in the middle, delay the cuts for 5 years and only do $500 billion or something like that. And even though it would be something that Democrats weren't happy with, they would deal with it for now because it would delay it till later when they think they could fix it. But that's not what's happening. Like I said, Republicans are demanding what they're demanding, and they want Democrats to just roll over and cave, and they're not doing it. Now, some people thought that the Democrats would cave after the No Kings protest. That didn't happen. They're holding strong. Now, the other day, the head of the Federal Labor Union, what was it? Everett Miller, I think. I could be getting the name wrong. Doesn't matter. He came out and said, the Democrats need to end the shutdown and get people back to work. But they're not doing that because this is where Democrats have leverage. Now, they gave up back in March. We could have had this over and done with if the Democrats would have fought like this in March. But in favor of, keeping the government open and not having a shutdown and just keeping everything flowing, and in good faith, the Democrats agreed to what Republicans wanted, which was a clean CR. They funded the government, and with promises of, we will talk about your concerns later. Well, later's here. The Affordable Care Act subsidies expire at the end of the year. We are just over 2 months away till the end of that year. and people are starting to already see sticker shock for how much their insurance is going to go up. I saw one article saying, not counting any change in the subsidies. And if the subsidies go away, this number goes out the window. Is that depending on which state you are in, anywhere from 17 to 30% increase in your premiums. 17 to 30%. That is a huge number. But if the subsidies go away, they could go up as much as 75% to double. And that makes insurance unaffordable. Now, Republicans want the Affordable Care Act to fail. Why? Because they have been trying to get it to fail, to get it to go away since it passed during Barack Obama's term. They vilified the Affordable Care Act, but they kept calling it Obamacare. They vilified it so bad that there are tons of people that still hate Obamacare and don't realize that the Affordable Care Act is the exact same thing because they love the Affordable Care Act. There are people that have grown up not knowing what it was like pre-Affordable Care Act. When you were 18, you did not get to stay as a dependent on and use the dependent discount on your parents' insurance, so your premium didn't go up. If you were able to even be on their insurance at 18, they charged you as a full person, and their premiums went through the roof. If you could even be covered, some cases it wasn't allowed, which was rough for especially some high school students that didn't graduate until 19, or college students who went off to college. They weren't working, they didn't have employer sponsored health care. And they may just go without. Now, a lot of them are relatively healthy, sure, but if they didn't have insurance, they were gambling with whether or not they could afford to, get sick. If they got sick, they were in trouble. And then you add in the pre-existing conditions bullshit that was allowed, where people were tied to their job. If you had, say, you got undiagnosed diabetes, but you had your work insurance, and then you got diagnosed, okay, you were fine. But then you tried to switch jobs for better pay or a better opportunity, better hours, whatever the case may be. The new job could say, well, oh, you're a diabetic? Yeah, we're not going to cover you. Pre-existing condition. You got to pay for all that out of pocket. Or they would charge you a pre-existing condition premium, which would be even higher than what you had to pay before. And that's what Republicans want us to go back to. Some of the other changes that came about because of the Affordable Care Act I've talked about is they used to try to, with kids, even if the child is 6, 7, 8 years old, whatever the case may be, they find out they had something they were born with, but doesn't get found until they're much older, right? Till they're, a young child. Well, then the insurance companies would still try to say pre-existing condition and not cover it. Now they can't do that. They have to cover it. Same with, they used to be able to say lifetime maximum on your insurance policy, period. Well, you had one, I had a coworker, had major back issues, had a major back surgery, and they had it the year before the Affordable Care Act took effect. They were when it was all said and done, they were up against the lifetime maximum that our employer had for an insurance policy. And if they wouldn't have changed the Affordable Care Act, the following year, he probably wouldn't have been able to get health insurance through our employer because they'd say, no, we've paid all we're going to pay for you ever. Now they can put yearly limits, but not lifetime, which means if you have some serious condition, every year your health insurance through your job is going to be able to cover you. And they made it easier for people to go get insurance through the exchanges, where instead of having to go get an insurance policy to cover one person, you can now get into a group basically through the exchange, and now you are getting a much better rate because insurance works by having the healthy people who don't use the insurance pay premiums in to offset the costs for the people who are sick and actually using the insurance on a routine basis. They don't make money on unhealthy people. It's kind of like a good analogy would be a buffet. You go to like to the Golden Corral or something. Golden Corral is not going to make money on a person like me. I'll go in and I try to get my money's worth. But you go in and you get somebody else who pays for the same price I did, but only takes one plate. They make a fortune by comparison, and that's how kind of insurance works. But with the Affordable Care Act, we made it better. We were able to do it, but Republicans want it to fail because they don't like Obama. They didn't want to give him credit for that win, and because a lot of them are backed by insurance companies who want to be able to make as much money as they possibly can. And even when right now we have to fix healthcare, it's still not perfect. But Republicans don't have an off plan. In fact, Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling out Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, saying, "Hey, let's find out what is our replacement, what is our off ramp for the Affordable Care Act. We've been talking about it. What are we going to introduce? What are we going to do? How are we going to fix it? Let's do something." But so far, they haven't introduced anything. Now, remember, Donald Trump said during his first term that he was 2 weeks away from releasing his health care plan. We never got it. It was 2 weeks away, almost his entire presidency. And then we went all the way through the Biden administration. They never released any sort of a health care plan. And then Donald Trump claimed again during the debate that he had his health care plan, he was going to repeal and replace Obamacare. And when he was debating Kamala Harris, she asked him, "What's your health care plan?" And he comes back with, "Well, I have concepts of a plan." Concepts of a plan means no plan. So they don't even have any sort of way to replace it. They're just hoping that they can fuck with it enough that we're pissed off enough that we want it gone and that we'll think the old way was better. It's not. I remember what it was like before the Affordable Care Act. A lot of people do. And for those people who have grown up not knowing what it was like, if they think it's better, it's just because they don't know what it was like. And if we do lose the Affordable Care Act, they'll find out real quick, and they are going to be wishing we had that back again. Now, I don't know if the Affordable Care Act is going to go away. I don't think the Republicans can actually make it happen unless they somehow make the Affordable Care Act unfavorable with the American people. And the only way they seem to be able to do that right now is with the subsidies going away. So we're in the middle of all of this with the government shutdown. I kind of got off where I was going there, but going back to the food stamp thing. Now, Josh Hawley wants to introduce a bill, and he's got 10 Republican co-sponsors to fund SNAP benefits and food stamps. Chuck Schumer has said they want to introduce a funding bill to restore funding for food stamps. Okay, if either one of those pass, they have to go to the House. Now, they were also talking about passing a funding bill to pay essential government workers to make sure they all got paid, like air traffic controllers. Because right now, air traffic controllers aren't getting paid, but they're deemed essential to make sure we have planes landing safely at all the major airports and making sure that we don't have midair collisions, etc. They're highly skilled people, highly trained, and they're not getting paid right now because there's no funding approved for it. Well, Mike Johnson comes out and says, "Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if we'd be willing to do that. We did fund all those things back in September, and now the Democrats just have to fund agree to what we agreed to fund." So it sounds like he doesn't want to bring the House back into session should something come out of the Senate and pass. But why? Why wouldn't he want to bring the House back into session? And I don't think it has anything to do with those bills. In a perfect world, I think he would bring them back. But see, there's something hanging over Mike Johnson's head. Well, two things, really. One, he's got the Epstein files. The minute they bring the House back into session, he has to swear in Representative Grijalva, and they're going to have to schedule a vote on whether or not to release the Epstein files. Okay. When that happens, all the Republicans in the House of Representatives are going to have to decide. Do they want to piss off Donald Trump? Or do they want to risk pissing off their voters by saying, no, we're not going to release the Epstein files? So Donald Trump doesn't want the files released. The voters do. And they're going to have to make a hard decision. And depending on how that vote goes, and I think it doesn't matter if it passes by one vote or 50 or 100. But the more votes that it passes by in the Republican Party, the more likely the other thing that is hanging over Mike Johnson's head will be, and that is he may get voted out as Speaker. I've talked about that quite a bit. Now, there is a good chance that Mike Johnson doesn't survive the year or doesn't make it to the midterms as Speaker of the House. If they vote to pass the Epstein file resolution, I think Donald Trump may try to get him out as Speaker. If they end up caving and not holding out to get all of Donald Trump's priorities and keep the cuts in place, etc., because of how bad it would make them look, and how weak Donald Trump would think it would make him look for giving in to the Democrats, he may be out as Speaker. So he doesn't. His answer is just keep the Republicans out and not even bring them back. And now, if they pass bills in the Senate to fund partial things, he may not even bring the House back for that, which again I think would increase the likelihood that he gets voted out as Speaker. And it wouldn't take very many Republicans to side with all Democrats to get rid of Mike Johnson. And why would Democrats save Mike Johnson? Unless the government isn't open and they have bills to vote on, etc., to fund the government, including um, concessions by Republicans like extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies and things like that, where they need him to be there and he's going to actually hold those votes, and they've given concessions, they may save him. But if the government gets funded and then they try to oust him, especially if it's over the Epstein files, Democrats have no reason to save Mike Johnson. They really don't. And I think he knows that, so he's getting worried that they are going to end up voting him out as Speaker. And then he has to worry about, does he stay in Congress? Does he resign like Kevin McCarthy did? Or what does he do from there? We'll have to see if that actually plays out, but that is one of the things that could happen. Now, while all this is going on and with the government being shut down, Donald Trump isn't anywhere around. He's in Asia. And by now, maybe you have seen the video. And if not, you should go look it up. Donald Trump appeared when he was meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi. I think I'm getting that name right. And if I got it wrong, I do apologize. But he's meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister, and they're doing like an honor guard ceremony, etc., where there's troops there and stuff. Donald Trump appears lost and confused at numerous points. Now, he apparently, much like he normally does, was probably not prepared for this particular ceremony, because I guarantee you one of his aides probably said, okay, Donald, okay, Mr. President, we got to go over exactly how this ceremony is going to work. And he probably came back with, I know how this goes. I know what I'm doing. Don't bother me with that. I'm the president. I know what I'm doing. Well, there was at one point during this honor guard ceremony where they were supposed to go past or toward the American and the Japanese flag. Now, the protocol was going to be they turn and they bow toward the Japanese flag. Donald Trump kind of gets to the American flag, gives a salute, which he does a lot during the national anthem, etc., which a lot of people have issue with because he was never in the military. And I don't know why he feels the need to do that, but he does. Okay. And then as they're walking toward the Japanese flag, which was just a few steps away, he was supposed to stop, turn, and bow. He just kind of keeps walking. And in the one video I saw, as he walked past, Prime Minister Takaichi turns, looks at him, and her jaw literally just drops. Like, what is this buffoon doing? So she gets to the flag, turns, bows, catches up to him, and it appears like she is kind of leading him around this area and directing him where he needs to go. Like he's got no clue as to where he is supposed to be. And Donald Trump sparks more health concerns by doing things like this. Now, we find out that when he went to Walter Reed, he had an MRI. Okay. But that's not part of a standardized physical. I've had physicals. A lot of people have had them. And a lot of us are all saying the same thing. Never have had an MRI as part of a physical. I've had an MRI done as part of a test for something else, but never for a physical. And, then you add in the fact that his face droops from time to time, especially when it seems like he's getting tired. There was video of him getting to Japan where he's walking very deliberate down the steps. He's holding on tight, walking very slow, like he's afraid of falling, which is something that if you've had strokes, does happen because your sense of balance is off. A lot of times, there are a lot of people that end up when they have had a stroke, they need the aid of a walker or a cane just for added leverage to make and for an added sense of balance. But Donald Trump, I guarantee you, even if his doctor told him he needed a cane or a walker, because he views that as a sign of weakness, would never accept it. And then there was also images and video of him where it appeared like he was favoring his left side and kind of dragging his right leg along like it wasn't cooperating. Another sign that maybe he has had a stroke. I know several people who have had a stroke who do not have the muscle control in one side of their body like that. It happens. One of the things that can happen with a stroke is if you do have these issues, normally when you walk, you land heel first and you kind of roll toward the ball of your foot and press off with the ball, but your heel takes all of the impact, and that's what it's designed to do. But what'll happen sometimes is your foot won't balance out and you won't land heel first. You'll land ball of the foot first. And then it does look like that, like you are just dragging your foot along. So it looks like he has had some very serious health concerns. And then you add the fact that she's just kind of dragging him around the room. And, he doesn't appear to know the protocol, which doesn't surprise me because, like I said, I think they tried to brief him, but I don't think he accepted any briefing on protocol because of who he is. Donald Trump is a malignant narcissist who believes he is as fit as he was 20, 30 years ago, and that there's absolutely nothing wrong with him, and you are never going to convince him otherwise. Period. So he is sparking a lot of concerns. And then he talks about passing these cognitive tests. He called them aptitude tests or IQ tests. And he says, well, the first few questions are easy. And he describes it. What he's describing is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. We've talked about this. He talks about, identifying a lion and a giraffe and a zebra or whatever, 3 animals. Then they ask you to remember 4 words. And then they come back to you a few minutes later and ask you to repeat those words. They don't give that to you just because. That is not something that becomes a standard test unless you have had a reason. Whether they think you've had some kind of a traumatic brain injury, whether you've had a stroke, something like that, or you're showing signs of dementia, where it looks like you are having issues. Then they consider it, then they give it to you, and then they give it to you every so often to see as a comparison of where you are now versus where you were then. Are you getting better? Are you getting worse? Are you staying the same? What's going on there? But he talks about it and he wants to challenge AOC to take this same test. I think she should. I think it would be funny because then it would come out that what he took was the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And of course, there would be no reason for a perfectly healthy 36-year-old like AOC to have anything wrong to where you can't pass it. So she would pass it with flying colors, and then we could, push Donald Trump to potentially release his or take one on live TV and prove he doesn't know what he's doing, that he is impaired. But see, his handlers would prevent that from happening. Why? Because as long as he's around, they can manipulate him into doing whatever they want him to do. I don't think he knows half of what he's signing. He was asked about pardoning this head of this one crypto exchange. He had done it the day before. They asked him about it. He had no idea who they were talking about. And then he kind of stumbled through it. Well, a very fine person or something, came highly recommended, so I gave him the pardon. Didn't know who they were talking about. It was only a day later. He's not well. I don't think he makes it to the end of his term. I think something is going to happen, and I think JD Vance is going to become president, one way or the other. Now, the best hope for the Republican Party would be if the Big Mac gets him or the dementia gets him, and he collapses on stage somewhere, where they can't deny what happened to him, and he's just out. He's gone. Or he ends up in a state where he can't talk, he can't type, he can't go to Truth Social, because then they would have no way, or he'd have no way of hitting back when they go and use the 25th Amendment and remove him. If Donald Trump is in any way able to communicate and they have to take him out, even if it's for his own good, you would never convince Donald Trump of that it's for his own good. He would never leave willingly. So he would burn the Republican Party down in the process. All right. Now, Donald Trump was on the USS Gerald Ford, an aircraft carrier, I believe, in Japan. And again, showing more signs of dementia and showing that he doesn't entirely know even what's going on. So he's on the Gerald Ford and he's talking about launching airplanes off of ships. Now, the Gerald Ford uses the most up to date version of the launching technology. They use electromagnets. But Donald Trump was talking about, well, we need to use steam catapults like we used to. We haven't used steam catapults. Surprisingly, it surprised me how recent we quit using steam, but that was 2017 during his first term, almost 10 years ago. They almost all new builds have switched over to electromagnets, but Donald Trump doesn't like electromagnets. Why? Because he doesn't understand them, for one, and he thinks they quit working when you put them in water. Well, but he was standing on an aircraft carrier where they can launch planes with electromagnets, and the boat's in water. Guess what? It works. Um, and there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why they switched over. But Donald Trump is again going back on, well, we should go back to using steam. We're going to retrofit all of the ships and go back to using steam powered. Oh, it's going to cost a lot of money, but we're going to do it anyway. Donald Trump thinks the U.S. Uh, Treasury is his personal bank account to do with as he pleases. That he can just say and do things and change things for no reason because he doesn't like something. I don't know if he thinks electromagnets have something to do with the Green New Deal or something like that, where he's having issues with it. But he's out there saying things like, well, we're going to go back to using steam powered. Electromagnets are way more efficient and they're modern. They're up to date. They work better, way better than steam. So I don't even know what Donald Trump was talking about. And a lot of times, I don't know if he knows what he's talking about. He just goes out and he just says things off the cuff, uh, hoping that it sounds good. Now, he's on the Gerald Ford. Okay, great. But now we're hearing, I don't know if it's the Gerald Ford or if it's another aircraft carrier, that they're going to be sending an aircraft carrier to the coast of Venezuela, trying to intimidate Venezuela. Now, we've sunk at least 10 boats off the coast of Venezuela that they claim, without proof, are smuggling contraband, illicit substances, narcotics, if you will. But they don't do the proper procedures in order to prove that. The proper way to handle it would be either to do a joint venture with Venezuela, which probably isn't going to happen because they are accusing the Venezuelan president of, um, being in league with the cartels and helping to make all of that happen. So while they're saying that's all going on, Venezuela wouldn't do it. But a joint venture where they go in, seize the boats, do a search. If they find the contraband, seize the contraband and arrest and charge the crew. That would be the correct way to do it. Or wait till they hit U.S. water, have the Coast Guard meet them, and then if we know where they're leaving from, we could track them, especially with satellites now, and know exactly where they're at. We could see where they hit U.S. waters, have the Coast Guard there, meet them, again, board them, uh, seize any of the contraband, charge them, and put them in U.S. custody and in U.S. prisons. But that's not what Donald Trump is doing. He's blowing the boats up and just saying, well, yeah, they had contraband on them. They had illegal drugs. We're running the drugs. And now he's talking about potentially doing land strikes in Venezuela, starting a war with Venezuela. But he's supposed to be the peace president and deserving of a Nobel Peace Prize. He acts on a whim, and he acts as if any of this is, normal. It's not. There is no strategy behind what he's doing. He's just out for revenge. Now, some people have suggested he's only doing it because he wants to eliminate, a Latino population. Now, he had talked about doing the same thing that he's doing to Venezuela, to Mexico. And somebody talked him out of doing it to Mexico. Now, does he consider Venezuela maybe an easier target? Probably. Um, so I don't know what his reasoning is here, but it's not a peaceful thing. It probably has nothing to do with actual contraband, and no drug running. But he also thinks it makes him look tough and that it makes him look strong, when in reality, it makes him look like an idiot. It makes him look weak, and he is committing war crimes that, depending on where he ends up in these travels, could potentially land him in front of the International Criminal Court with charges. All right. Now, Donald Trump is doing this Asia trip. And one of the things he is doing with this Asia trip is discussing trade. Now, supposedly he is working out a trade deal with China. I talked about that in a couple times in previous podcasts, but let's talk about it again. Now, supposedly this trade deal is going to include setting tariffs, at a fixed number between both countries. And then after it is signed and the ink is dry, Donald Trump wouldn't increase tariffs again, and he would agree to it. But why would China agree to that? Why would they believe that when Donald Trump, during his first term, he signed the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, agreeing to zero tariffs between us and Mexico and Canada, and he's backed out of it now, and he goes, well, who signed such a dumb agreement? He doesn't even remember that he signed it. So he could sign this agreement now and in 3 weeks be pissed at China over something and just ignore it because he won't remember he signed it. Beyond that, supposedly the deal is going to have a bulk purchase of U.S. soybeans. Now, that would be good news for U.S. farmers. However, I don't think that's going to happen for this calendar year. It may be a return to buy them for next year, but that just means that next year won't hurt as bad. But there's already been a lot of damage happening to U.S. farms because they had crops that they had already agreed or had planned to sell because they knew how much they could sell and how much China would buy, etc., for certain prices. Well, when China said, yeah, we're not buying any soybeans now, that was like $20 billion of an investment gone that U.S. farmers didn't have. Then you couple that with Donald Trump getting rid of USAID, and that was, again, guaranteed sales for these farmers, gone. So the U.S. agriculture is hurting. So supposedly there is money in this trade deal with China that would guarantee, at least $12 billion in purchases from China. But 12 billion is still less than 20, which still means that China wouldn't be buying as much. And if I'm right that it is next year from us, then they were going to buy this year. Oh, but where'd they buy their soybeans this year? Argentina. The same country Donald Trump has sent 40 billion or is going to send $40 billion to. And the same country that Donald Trump suggests buying beef from to lower U.S. beef prices, while telling U.S. ranchers that he knows more about ranching than they do. So Donald Trump thinks he's got this deal potentially with a guarantee of purchase of soybeans. What else? Well, supposedly there's going to also be some kind of a joint investment uh, into the United States, like he talks about in all of his other deals. Except most of those deals, when he says there's going to be a joint investment, we don't entirely hear all the details. That doesn't always happen. The numbers don't end up being as good as what Donald Trump makes them out to be, etc. So we'll see if that even comes to play. And then there's going to be, uh, you know, a loosening of restrictions on us acquiring rare earth minerals. Now that would be a good thing. But you know something? Until Donald Trump became president this time, we'd rarely heard of rare earth minerals. I had to go figure out what they were one of the first times I'd heard him talk about it. Why? Because we didn't have any problem getting them. It was just something we did. Now, the refining process, from what I am hearing, is highly toxic, and China handles like 90% of the refining of rare earth minerals. So that's where we get most of it. And even if they don't produce the minerals to begin with, a lot of places that do have the rare earth minerals send them to China to get refined. And then that's where we get our finished product from. The refined minerals is from China. So apparently those restrictions are going to be loosened. Okay. And of course, there's going to be, again, something on a TikTok deal. Now, I think he's just saying that because he wants to be the savior for TikTok. And I don't even know if there's ever going to be a TikTok deal. China has never commented saying that there definitely is a deal or there's going to be a deal or anything like that. So as we deal with it, we'll have to see if they end up coming to terms. But this is like the fourth deal Donald Trump has said he has had with China. Every time it comes around, they have a deal, then things go sideways. Donald Trump reacts to something China does or something somebody else does, and then the deal goes away. So we'll see if even if he negotiates this deal, if it would happen. And now supposedly he's also negotiating a deal with Japan. He's going to be negotiating with the Japanese prime minister uh, and trying to come up with trade terms for Japan. But wait a minute, over the summer he had a trade deal with Japan, or so he told us. They said they had this great deal worked out, and I think it was going to be 15% tariffs that we put on everything coming from Japan. I don't remember. I think they were going to put zero on us, I think is what it was, and that they were going to have this big investment into the United States. So then what happened? Well, then we started hearing that the investment wasn't what they thought or what we thought it was going to be. And it sounded like the deal kind of fell apart. But Donald Trump claimed to have the deal. And now he's over negotiating another deal. Did he forget he had a deal? Did the deal fall through? Or was there never a deal in the first place? Which is entirely possible that there just wasn't a deal there. And of course, he lied because he lies about everything. He comes up with these sound bites. He says a lot of things. And then it sounds like he's doing all this winning, but then when you look even a little deeper, there's nothing there. There's nothing to back up his claims that any of this is actually going on. So he's supposedly negotiating with Japan. We'll see if there ends up being an actual deal. If he comes up with any sort of a trade deal with Japan that becomes legitimate, if there are tariffs above, I think it's 2% put on coming from Japan, that means everything will be more expensive that comes from Japan. That includes a lot of your electronics, anything made by Nintendo, for example. A lot of computer components and stuff come from Japan. And all of that stuff will end up being more expensive. Now, one of the other places he's going to be negotiating with is South Korea. And he is hoping to salvage the Hyundai plant in Georgia. Now, they have been trying to get them to come back and finish the plant and keep and reinvest, etc. And they're not. So far, nothing has worked to get them to come back and reopen the Hyundai plant and train Americans and do what they were going to do. And if you don't know what I'm talking about is there was a Hyundai plant in Georgia going to make, I think it was Hyundai batteries for their electric cars. I could be wrong. but they were going to make things for Hyundai's here in America. And when it happened, what happened was uh, there was a number of Korean nationals here working in the plant, and they were there not to help oversee building the plant to make sure it met their specifications and to train U.S. workers on the machines necessary to do the job. It was going to be nothing but American jobs, which is what supposedly this administration and MAGA Republicans, etc., want is American jobs. But here we are. There was a woman who I believe is running for either as a member of Congress from Georgia or she may be a Senate candidate, something like that in Georgia, and I can't think of her name. Uh, she found out that there were a bunch of Koreans working at this plant. She called ICE. ICE raids the plant, and a lot of them had visas to be here. Now, they end up getting detained. Apparently, according to some reports, they got mistreated in U.S. custody. The uh, South Korean government had to come over with a plane, and they took them all back to South Korea and said, yeah, we're just done with the plant. We're not going to deal with it. And Donald Trump initially said, well, they had the wrong type of visa. Okay. Well, now he's backing off on it now that the fallout is there. And now he's saying, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't have done that. It was a bad idea. We need to smooth things over and maybe we can get them to come back. I don't know that they ever come back. I don't know that they would want to. Why would they? Why would they want to come back? I wouldn't. I go into a foreign country. I'm there to train their employees on how to use the equipment we're putting in so they can make my items for me. And then I get how they react to me is calling in their version of immigration and arresting me for doing the job that I was there to do. I wouldn't want to come back. Why would they want to come back? Makes no damn sense. But he's going to hopefully try to smooth things over there. Now, one of the other things we have to worry about while I think he is going to South Korea. I could be wrong. Is going to be how he reacts with and deals with Kim Jong Un, or is it Kim Jong Il? Un, I think. I think Il was his father. Either way, the leader of North Korea. Donald Trump, during his first term, did something that no American president had done since the ending of the Korean conflict, and he stepped foot in North Korea. Now, why had no U.S. president done it? Donald Trump would have you believe that it was a guts thing. Well, he was the only one brave enough to do it, and everything else had nothing to do with any of that. It was all about we didn't view the North Korean government as necessarily legitimate. We didn't want to give him, we didn't want to legitimize. We didn't want to make him legitimate in how he was doing things and how he was treating his people. So we just didn't really acknowledge him that well. And we left it at that. But Donald Trump, because he likes that strongman type of leader, of course he had to walk across the demilitarized zone, go into North Korea and meet with him. He makes a fool out of this country in everything he does. He looks lost 90% of the time now. Like I was talking about with him and the Japanese prime minister. Her jaw literally dropped at his just wandering away. I mean, you should go, if you haven't seen the clip, you should go look up the clip. It literally looks like he just kind of, okay, I see the flag. I better salute. Oh, okay, what's going on over there? And he wanders away. If that had been Joe Biden, and if Joe Biden had said or done half of the things Donald Trump has done this term only since January 20th, they would be running it day and night on Fox News, talking about how unfit Joe Biden is, who's really running the country, is everything being handled by auto pen, that Joe Biden is out of it, much like they did during his first term. And Joe Biden actually didn't have these kind of issues. A lot of what happened with Joe Biden was selective editing by Fox News. For example, there was a day in Normandy with Joe Biden where he was talking to somebody. He was legitimately having a conversation, but the way Fox edited the frame was it made it look like Joe Biden was looking off in the distance talking to nobody. But when you saw the angle from a different point of view, you could clearly see he was talking to somebody. But that's what Fox News does. But why aren't they covering Donald Trump like this? Oh, because he makes them money. Because their viewers like to see Donald Trump and they think he is some kind of God king, that he is some kind of infallible person. It is some of the weirdest shit imaginable. So, with all of this going on, we are seeing cracks in the Republican Party as people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are calling for uh, the Republicans to get to work and actually bring forward bills and plans, et cetera, to do things to help people. They want to know what the health care plan is going to be, how they're going to fix Medicare or fix the Affordable Care Act or replace it if that's what they're going to do. They want to know what's going to happen with everything. And Republicans really don't have a plan. Their plan is to blame Democrats. They want to blame Democrats for the shutdown. Mike Johnson went as far as to say that Democrats are in control of Congress. What? No, they're not. Oh, excuse me. He goes ahead in the clip and he says, "Hey, wait a minute. Well, especially in the Senate, where it takes 60 votes to get passed, so they're really in charge." No, they're not. Republicans hold a 53-seat majority in the Senate. They can change the rules on a whim. They have changed the rules. They could carve out the filibuster, but they're not doing that. They are not doing that in order to, try to blame the Democrats. So if they pass this bill as it stands and things go sideways, they want to be able to blame Democrats for signing off on it. I fully think that. Now, while this is all going on, we have the East Wing basically destroyed. I think it is almost, if it is not completely gone, it's mostly gone at this point. Now, Donald Trump has yet to release plans. He keeps saying they're going to be released when appropriate. The appropriate time was supposed to be before you started any deconstruction, any demolition. You were supposed to go through several different planning groups and get their approval, congressional approval, and a budget to do this. Now, Republicans are saying, well, Donald Trump can do it. It's privately funded. Okay. So does that mean if I go out, rent a house, and I decide, there are basic oak cabinets in there in the kitchen, but I don't like oak. I want mahogany. I rip the cabinets off the wall, use them as kindling, and put in new cabinets, but I paid for it myself. Should the landlord be appreciative and tell me, good job? Oh, that's so much better? No, because it's not my place to do that. Same thing with Donald Trump. It's not his house. It belongs to the American people. But he decides he's going to tear down the East Wing to build this gaudy ballroom. Okay. Now, some people are suggesting that the ballroom and the high cost, which doesn't seem to match up with other construction projects by a long shot, it's triple the cost. There are several things that could be going on here. One, is he going to try to do some kind of a grift and funnel the money through companies and have him get kickbacks and make a bunch of money off this? That wouldn't surprise me at all. Not with Donald Trump. Everything he does is a grift. It's all about making himself money. So that's entirely possible. Other people are suggesting that the high cost has nothing to do with the ballroom itself, but that he is going to be renovating the bunker that was under the East Wing, the emergency bunker, making it bigger, more fortified to hold way more people so that when things get out of hand, he's got a safe place to hide with him and a bunch of the rich people in this country. Again, wouldn't surprise me. And if that happens, we should, maybe not know about it because some of that is classified, but they can do that and make it public knowledge, at least through oversight in Congress. Now, there were other planning committees that he was supposed to talk to, one of which is the Congressional Preservation Committee or something like that, where the Schraff is the head of, and he was an aide or is an aide to Donald Trump. He put his friend in charge, or his aide, and the aide goes, "Yeah, I only need to oversee new vertical build. I don't need to oversee anything when it comes to demolition," and kind of abdicated his responsibility. But at the same time, uh, that makes no sense. But that committee is also currently furloughed as non-essential. So Donald Trump is just doing what he wants to do. But then we find out yesterday that there is this committee for fine arts in Washington, D.C. This committee is somebody Donald Trump was supposed to go to. They can have a say, or do have a say, in planning and maintaining historical places and buildings, etc., within the Capitol. Well, what did he do? Fired the whole works, fired the board, every last one of them. Why? Because most of them were put on the board or either nominated or renominated by Joe Biden. And they want to put people in who are more in line with his priorities, which, if you're not paying attention, translation means people who are going to be yes men or yes women or whatever, however you want to phrase that, and just sign off on everything Donald Trump does. Now, that's the case. He wants people to just green light what he's doing, tell him he's a genius for doing it, and move on. So he fires this board. Now, a lot of his firings have gone to court and they get overturned because they find out he doesn't have the authority. I don't know what his authority with firing this board is going to be, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is another case where he goes to court and they end up deciding that no, you didn't have the authority to do it. You didn't follow the proper procedures, because he never does. He acts on a whim, and that they put him back in place, pending court proceedings, etc. It wouldn't surprise me, because one thing is always true. When it comes to Donald Trump doing anything, he's either embarrassing us, should be embarrassing himself, but he's not self-aware enough to realize he should be embarrassing himself, or he fucks up. One of those three outcomes. Sometimes all three at once. Now, speaking of going to court, we've got oral arguments coming up next week about Donald Trump and his tariffs. And he did something last week that may have just sunk his argument in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. He's trying to claim national emergency powers to do tariffs, and that's what he's using. Okay. Well, Canada comes out with this ad where it quotes Reagan, and Reagan talking about tariffs and how it's a dumb idea to use them in the way Donald Trump is actively using them. And he's pissed and he's mad because he gets embarrassed. So he comes out and he basically said, well, they came out with this fake ad, and they're attacking me with these ads. So I'm not gonna trade negotiate with them anymore, and more tariffs. Well, him saying that publicly, I think he said it on his Truth Social account, is admissible in court. And they could introduce that, I believe, as motivation on the side against the tariffs, to show that he is not actually worried about national security, but more about using retribution with these tariffs. So that's what's going on there. We'll see what the Supreme Court says. When they have those oral arguments, we'll have a better idea of which way this court leans with it. But because of the fact that in the original wording of the law Donald Trump is trying to use on these tariffs, because of the fact that the word tariff doesn't appear anywhere in that law, makes me believe this Supreme Court, even for as bad as it is, would not side with him on it. That they would find a reason to say no. All right. Now, speaking of national security, the last thing I want to cover real quick is we are hearing that when it comes to operations in Venezuela with blowing up these fishing boats, etc. I talked about that a little earlier in the podcast. But we are hearing that uh, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is trying to get members of the military to sign these non-disclosure agreements. Basically, you know, we're gonna seal up any sort of a leak to the press by forcing you to sign an NDA. That way, we can go after you if you talk to the press because you agreed you wouldn't talk about whatever you saw. And why would they do that? Well, if everything was on the up and up, and what they have told us about these boats was legit, and there was a legitimate concern, and that's why they got blown up, that would mean they wouldn't need the NDA. Or is it that they've lied to us about what's going on with these fishing boats, and that they end up doing what they're doing, and now they're trying to cover their tracks so it doesn't get out to the media because they know it's unpopular? There's one thing though with NDAs. NDAs aren't enforceable if you're breaking the law. You can break an NDA if the thing you are forced to not discuss is a crime. And blowing up these fishing boats with no proof, like I talked about before, the proper procedure would be to let them hit U.S. water and then board them, arrest them, and charge them, not having the military be judge, jury, and executioner. So I don't know if these NDAs are even going to be enforceable, but that's their latest plan to try to stop the leaks because they know the more stories come out and the more people hear, the worse it looks for this administration because they can't do everything that they're doing, but they're doing it anyway. They shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and they're doing it anyway. This administration is just acting, and it's performative in a lot of cases. They're not really governing. They don't care about what the law is, and they're just doing a lot of things. In part, I think it is because Donald Trump couldn't get anybody decent around him to be in these positions because nobody wanted to be associated with Donald Trump because of they realize anybody decent knows how bad his legacy is going to be. And now that we are seeing proof, as I've talked about him being led around and how it looks like he's just completely out of it, and he's having all of these dementia-like symptoms. The people that he can get are using him for everything he's worth, trying to be able to, and they're doing some dumb stuff like what they're doing with these fishing boats that is illegal. But because Donald Trump is not with it, doesn't understand what's going on anymore, they can tell him it's legal, they can tell him it's this, they can tell him it's that, and he will sign off on it. Because he doesn't know any better, because he's not in his right mind. And when it comes to it and he is gone, we need to have congressional hearings. We need to have investigations and look into how much was Donald Trump compromised, who was actively running the government, and when was he impaired? Was he impaired his whole term? Because this is going to change fundamentally how things function, and it wouldn't surprise me if at some point they end up passing some kind of a constitutional amendment about getting cognitive tests or dementia tests or something for politicians over a certain age. Because we have a problem with aging politicians making decisions and doing things, and then we find out they're not in their right mind. We're seeing it with Donald Trump. We've seen it with some other people. It needs to stop. And it won't until we pass something that forces it to stop. All right, that is everything I got for you today over on the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I'll be back tomorrow. There's going to be even more to talk about, and we'll see if they made any progress, but I'm not expecting it.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.